Hi, boys and girls. I hope you're all doing great. So, as I was working on my plans for this week and I started getting our new Magic Treehouse book ready, it came across my mind that we never got to read the last two chapters of the book we were on because we had to leave school so quickly that Thursday and we haven't gotten to go back since. That makes me sad that you would just miss out on the last two chapters. So I decided that I would make a video for you with the last two chapters. That way you'll know how the book ends before we start this week's book. So if you remember, boys and girls, we were reading Stage Fright on a Summer Night, which is book number 25, and we had left off, we were on chapter 9, because chapter 9 would have been 9 and 10, what we read on Fridays. If you have this book at home and you want to follow along while I read, that's great. You are more than welcome to do that. If not, you can just turn your listening ears on, close your eyes if you want, and relax, and I will finish the story. Now, just to give you a little bit of a reminder of where we left off, the last thing that we had read, Annie was yelling at the man who owned the bear, telling him that he's a tame bear, he shouldn't be in the bear fights. And she had actually dressed the bear up using some of the costumes from the play that they were in to try to disguise him. So Jack says she's right and jumps in. And he said, besides, bear fighting isn't even cool. And then they hear a deep voice say, "'Tis indeed." And Jack and Annie and the bear whirled around and they saw Will and Puck standing at the edge of the woods. So chapter 9 is on page 57 and it is called Sweet Sorrow. "Tut tut, you're a sorry sight, man," Will said to the bear's owner. "Trying to sell an old tame bear to the fights? Well, I've been planning to write a play with a part for a bear, so take this money for him and be gone." Will handed some gold coins to the bear's owner. The man's eyes grew wide. He laughed. "Ha! You can have him," said the man, and he took off. "Thank you, and good riddance," called Will. Then he turned to Puck. "Take our new player to the stables. Tell the actors they needn't be afraid of him. He's tamer than most of them." "Come this way," Puck said. He put his arm around the bear and gently led him out from the trees. "You'll love the stage, old man." "Bye, Puck. Bye, Dan," said Annie. Puck smiled and waved. The bear stared for a moment at Jack and Annie. He had a grateful look in his eyes. Then he lumbered off with Puck. "Thanks, Will, for helping Dan," said Annie, "and for helping us." "Thank you both for helping me," said Will. "You saved the day." "The night, you mean," said Jack. "Indeed, the night," said Will. "Oh, here's your bag. You forgot it." He gave Jack his leather bag. Then he held up their two scrolls with their lines on them. "And you can take these," said Will. He handed them to Jack, and Jack put them in his bag. "Where are you off to now?" said Will. "The other side of London Bridge," said Annie. "Ah, I can take you there in my boat," he said. "Follow me." Will led them along a dusty path toward the river. The last rays of the sun slanted through the trees. Soon they came to a small rowboat docked on the Thames. "Climb in," said Will. Jack and Annie and Will climbed in. Will untied the boat from the dock. Then he began rowing across the river. The water reflected the purple and pink sky. Only a few white swans glided now over the shimmering ripples. The river smelled as bad as it had before, but Jack didn't mind now. He'd grown used to it. Jack pulled out his notebook and pencil. "What are you doing?" Will asked. "I wanted to write some of my memories in my notebook," said Jack. "Ah, and I'll note you both in my book of memory," said Will. Jack smiled. "I have a question, Will," said Annie. "Why does Queen Elizabeth have black teeth?" "Too much sugar," said Will. "I hope it doesn't make her feel bad looking that way, I mean," said Annie. "Oh, no, she's not the least hurt," said Will. "The Queen has no idea how she looks. She hasn't peeked in a good mirror for 20 years. "Is that true?" said Annie. "'Tis," said Will. "The Queen pretends to be young and beautiful, just as you pretended to be a boy and the bear pretended to be an actor. You see, the world's a stage." Jack liked that idea. He wrote in his notebook, "All the world's a stage." Jack looked up at London Bridge as they passed by. The shops on the bridge were closed now. The theater crowd was thinning out. The scary blackbirds were no longer on the rooftops. They had swooped down and were picking up the garbage left on the cobblestones. The show was over. By the time they came to the riverbank, night was falling. It was much cooler. Will tied up his rowboat and climbed ashore with Jack and Annie. "Thanks a lot," Jack said to Will. "We can go the rest of the way by ourselves." "Where do you live?" said Will. "In Frog Creek," said Annie. "What path do you take?" asked Will. "You'll never believe this," said Annie. "We climb up the rope ladder to a tree house in that tree over there, and then we open a book. Then we make a wish," said Jack, "and we go to the place in the book." Will smiled. "They life's a miracle, isn't it?" he said. "Yes," said Annie. Jack nodded. He liked the way Will looked at things. "I have an idea," said Will. "Why don't you both stay here instead? You can live and act at the Globe Theater. I'll ask the Queen to exclude you from the law about girls going on stage, Annie, because of your great talent. And I will teach you both to write plays." "Really?" said Jack and Annie together. Jack couldn't imagine anything more fun. Then he thought of his parents back in Frog Creek. "But our mom and dad," he said. "We would really miss them," said Annie. Will smiled. "I understand," he said, "and I would miss you if I were them." He put his hand over his heart. "So good night, good night. Parting is such sweet sorrow." "Yes, 'tis," said Annie, nodding. "Farewell," said Will. He waved. Jack and Annie waved back. Then Will turned on his heels and headed back to the rowboat. Jack and Annie walked to the rope ladder and climbed up to the treehouse. When they got inside, they looked out the window. Will was rowing back across the Thames River. A single white swan glided across the ripples beside the boat. The silver moon was rising in the sky. At that moment, Jack did feel sweet sorrow. He wanted to stay in merry old England just a little longer. "Wait, Will!" he shouted. But Annie picked up the Pennsylvania book. "I wish we could go home," she said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster, and then everything was still. Absolutely still. Chapter 10. Our Will? Jack opened his eyes. They were wearing their own clothes again. A lightning bug blinked inside the growing darkness of the treehouse. Annie picked up Morgan's note. She repeated the rhyme. "To find a special magic, you must step into the light, and without wand, spell, or charm, turn daytime into night." "We found the special magic," said Annie. "Theater magic." "Yup," said Jack. He opened his backpack. He and Annie took out the 2 scrolls that Will had given them. When they unrolled them, Jack saw that Will had written something. He read out loud, "Thank you both for helping me. Your friend, William Shakespeare." "William Shakespeare," said Annie. "I've heard that name before." "Me too," said Jack. He took out their research book. He looked up Shakespeare in the index. He turned to the page and he read aloud. "William Shakespeare lived from 1564 to 1616. He wrote 37 plays and many sonnets and other poems. Many people think he was the greatest writer who ever lived." "The greatest?" said Annie. "Our Will?" "Oh, man," whispered Jack. He stared in amazement at William Shakespeare's autograph. "Hey, can we leave our scrolls with Morgan's note?" said Annie. "It'll prove to her that we found the special magic." They put their 2 scrolls next to the note on the floor. Then they climbed down the rope ladder. When they started walking through the woods, a breeze blew, shaking the tree leaves. Shadows shifted. Birds called from hidden places. "Remember the enchanted woods?" Annie said in a hushed voice. "The Fairy King and the Fairy Queen." Jack smiled and nodded. "And Puck, the merry wanderer of the night," said Annie. "And Will, our Will." Jack nodded again. "I had a great time," said Annie. "Didn't you?" Jack sighed. "Yes," he said. Then he took a deep breath and he spoke very clearly and with feeling. "I have had the most rare vision. I have had a dream." And that's the end. So boys and girls, in this story, Jack and Annie learned theater magic. Now, because today is Monday, I will be starting the next book with you later on today. So that was book 25. Book 26, which we will begin later on today, is called Good Morning Gorilla. So I look forward to reading you chapters 1 and 2 later today. Be well. Bye.